Hey, this is Miss Cooper here with Chapter 11, Part 2. So you have a document, pretty thick, lots of pages. Just going to hit the highlights. Make sure you read this document, highlight, and annotate. So this is about World War II, okay? They also call it the Second World War. I'm just going to read, okay, and stop and break down things until we get to a decent time on this clock. So it says World War II, also called the Second World War, is a conflict that involved virtually every part of the world during the years 1939 to 1945. The principal belligerents were the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, and the Allies, France, Great Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, and to a lesser extent, China. Belligerent means the people that are the bad guys, the people that are wanting to fight. That's the Axis powers. They were called the Central Powers in World War I. Okay, and notice the switching of the sides. Japan was on the Allied side in World War I, and Japan is on the Axis powers in World War II. Okay, the war was in many respects a continuation after an uneasy 20-year hiatus of the disputes left unsettled by World War I. The 40 million to 50 million deaths occurred in World War II, make it the bloodiest conflict as well as the largest war in history. Along with World War I, World War II was one of the great watersheds of the 20th century geopolitical history. It resulted in the extension of the Soviet Union's power to nations of Eastern Europe, enabled a communist movement to eventually achieve power in China, and marked the decisive shift of power in the world away from the states of Western Europe and towards the United States and the Soviet Union. This is when the Soviet Union really is flexing its muscles. The United States became a superpower in World War I. Now, Russia was an old power, old power like France, old power.
Andre Button, please report to the main office. Andre Button, please report to the main office.
An old power and a superpower are two different things. Okay, you define an old power by a country that has a whole lot of respect and a very long history. A superpower is a country that has a whole lot of money, a really good military, they're lending money to other people, and they're basically doing pretty good, like really good, for them to be called a superpower. So make sure you got the words straight. Old power versus superpower. So, along with World War I, World War II was one of the great watersheds. We already said that. It resulted in the extension of the Soviet Union's power, Axis initiative, and Allied reaction. That's where we're going to go. The outbreak of war. Okay. By the early part of 1939, the German dictator Adolf Hitler had become determined to invade and occupy Poland. Poland, for its part, had guarantees of French and British military support should it be attacked by Germany. Hitler intended to invade Poland anyway, but first he had to neutralize the possibility that the Soviet Union would resist the invasions of its western neighbor. Neutralize. So you see, they wanted Poland in the first place. But yet they sat up there and made a deal and told the Soviet Union, Hitler did, made that deal with Stalin and said, Nazi Soviet non-aggression pact, that I'm not going to attack you. But they wanted Poland anyway. They just don't need Russia to get in the way. But they're kind of ready if Russia does get in the way. So they think that they're going to neutralize Russia so that they can still get Poland. That the Soviet Union would resist the invasion of its western neighbor. Secret negotiations led on August 23rd through the 24th to the signing of the German-Soviet non-aggression pact in Moscow. In a secret protocol of this pact, the Germans and the Soviets agreed that Poland should be divided between them. Let's see who keeps their word. Poland should be divided between them, with the western third of the country going to Germany and the eastern two-thirds being taken over by the USSR. Having achieved this cynical agreement, the other provisions of which stupefied Europe, even without divulgence of the secret protocol, Hitler thought that Germany could attack Poland with no danger of Soviet or British intervention and gave orders for the invasion to start on August the 26th. News of the signing on August the 25th of a formal treaty of mutual assistance between Great Britain and Poland to supersede a previous, though temporary, agreement caused him to postpone the start of the hostilities for a few days. He was still determined, however, to ignore the diplomatic efforts of the Western powers to restrain him. Finally, at 12:40 p.m. on August 31st of 1939, Hitler ordered hostilities against Poland to start at 4:45 the next morning. The invasion began as ordered. In response, Great Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3rd at 11 o'clock a.m. and at 5 o'clock p.m. respectively. World War II began. So yeah, here we go, Germany again. Doing stuff. This is exactly what we told them not to do. Forces and resources of the European combatants in 1939. In September of 1939, the Allies, namely Great Britain, France, and Poland, were together superior in industrial resources, population, and military manpower. But the German army, or Wehrmacht, because of its armament.
Miss Rushing's client?
This is Miss Cooper. Because of its armament, training, doctrine, discipline, and fighting spirit, was the most efficient and effective fighting force for its size in the world. The index of military strength in September 1939 was the number of divisions that each nation could mobilize. Against Germany's 100 infantry divisions and 6 armored divisions, France had 90 infantry divisions in metropolitan France. Great Britain had 10 infantry divisions, and Poland had 30 infantry divisions. So infantry versus cavalry. Your infantry are your people on foot. Your cavalry are your people that are mounted. Now, they used to would refer to people who rode on horseback and that were warriors. That was your cavalry. And the people who were on foot marching soldiers were infantry. So now it probably more than likely represents like the people who are inside of a tank, or the people who are driving trucks, but they're in the war, versus the foot soldiers carrying their guns. Infantry is what we're talking about, okay? Infantry versus cavalry, that's how you want to term it. But they're talking specifically about infantry, which means they're referring to people who are on the ground. So I had all these folks, okay? Britain just got a group, and Poland's got a group, and okay, France has a group. These could not be mobilized quickly. A division contained from 12,000 to 25,000 men. So you got to get all these guys together and say, hey, come on with your guns, put your uniform on, let's go fight. They're messing with us. It was the qualitative superiority of the German infantry divisions and the number of their armored divisions that made the difference in 1939. They had a very disciplined military that knew at the drop of a dime, we need you ready, we need you up here. The firepower of a German infantry division far exceeded that of a French, British, or Polish division, and standard German divisions included 442 machine guns, 135 mortars, 72 anti-tank guns, and 24 howitzers. Lots of weapons. Allied divisions had firepower only slightly greater than that of World War I. Germany had 6 armored divisions in September 1939, and they were not even supposed to have 1 bullet or 1 gun, and they had all these weapons. Yeah. Germany had 6 armored divisions in September of 1939. The Allies, though they had a large number of tanks, had no armored divisions at that time. The 6 armored or panzer divisions of the Wehrmacht comprised some 2,400 tanks. Although Germany would subsequently expand its tank forces during the first years of the war, it was not the number of tanks that Germany had. The Allies had almost as many in September 1939, but the fact of their being organized into divisions and operated as such, that was to prove decisive. In accordance with the doctrines of General Heinz Guderian, the German tanks were used in massed formations in conjunction with motorized artillery to punch holes in the enemy line and to isolate segments of the enemy, which were then surrounded and captured by motorized German infantry divisions, while the tank ranged forward to repeat the process. Deep drives into the enemy territory by panzer divisions were thus followed by mechanized infantry and foot soldiers. These tactics were supported by dive bombers that attacked and disrupted the enemy's supply and communication lines and spread panic and confusion in its rear, thus further paralyzing its defensive capabilities. Mechanization was the key to the German Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, so named because of the unprecedented speed and mobility that were its salient characteristics. Tested and well trained in maneuvers, the German Panzer Division constituted a force with no equal in Europe. So they were trained skillfully out there fighting, quickly maneuvering, getting into position, and destroying the enemy. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal. But this is a long document, and I basically just wanted to kind of get you the gist of how this thing breaks out. Okay, got the declarations of war, who did something to who first. Basically, a lot of it gets started with Hitler and these secret deals, and then going ahead and invading folks anyway. It's pretty much what it is. Not like World War I, where that one guy assassinated that other guy, and then Russia gets on Serbia's side and Germany gets on Austria. We see here Germany is just annexed Austria. Austria's looking like, well, that wasn't what we really wanted, but okay. So yeah, Germany's being a big bully right here. They're doing a whole bunch of things that they weren't supposed to do according to the Treaty of Versailles. All these bullets, all these weapons, they weren't supposed to even be militarized, let alone mobilizing, like moving your military. What are you doing sending troops anywhere? You're not even supposed to have a military. So yeah, that's the situation at the onset of World War II. Thank you for being here.